Oh, okay. I want to thank everybody for coming and tell you how very, very much it means for me to have you here. It just couldn't be more wonderful or lovable, and I really appreciate it. And just thank you so much. But the other thing I want to say, which I hadn't even thought about till John asked me, and I thought about, we left Germany. We left Paris, we left, not Paris, France, but I forgot the name of the place now. We left France on Mother's Day, 1937. And so it's exactly 77 years since we left.
Look at that.
And we arrived on May 19th, 1937 in New York. And the thing is that we had agreed with some relatives in New York that when we would be coming in, they would wave a green cloth and we would wave a green cloth, sort of like Billy's shirt, dark green. And so when we got into New York on the 19th and saw them wave and knew that they were waiting there for us was so, so wonderful. But anyway.
What ship did you come over on?
Yeah, we paid, well, I want to tell you first. What it was in 1937 is when we left. In 1935, things with Hitler got sort of bad. And in 1936, in 1935, I was in first grade, or second, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, and then it said only Jews can only be in certain places. They cannot be mixed with the other kids. So I had to go to a different school. And I don't know if Lee was in school. I don't remember her going to school at the time. But anyway, when you went to school, we had different hours than the non-Jewish kids. And since I was in not a very big city in Germany called Ludwigshafen am Rhein, it was on the Rhine River, we had quite a walk home at lunchtime. And in Germany, lunchtime was the big time to have lunch. Dinner was not as important as lunch because the men could come home from work at lunchtime and eat with the family. So when you got out, those kids were sort of coming back to school or coming out or whatever. Anyway, they call us all kinds of names and throw stuff at you. And I got to tell you, because I remember this so clearly, one of the things they yelled was, you scheißen die Tüte. And it means Jew shit in the bag, excuse the French. But anyway, and they taunt you and stuff like that. So we would walk home together. But the thing is, in 1936, my parents were ready to come to America. And then we had all the papers set and everything. In order to come to America, you had to have someone here who would sponsor you. And we had relatives here. My dad, a Heilbronner, had an uncle in Nashville, Tennessee, who had a liquor store. And he sponsored us, that uncle in Tennessee, who I only got to see once when they came up. I don't know whether it was New York or Chicago that we saw him in. I think it was New York. And then we also had, on my dad's mother's side, we had an uncle, Sigmund Weiss, and Evelyn Weiss. They were the parents. And they took wonderful care of us. And they got us an apartment in New York City that was very close to their apartment, which was on Central Park Avenue. And so the thing is that in 1936 sometime, or 37, my parents sent my sister and me, it was in 37, to my grandma's house in Stuttgart, Germany. And there we got English lessons. And the English lessons consisted of nursery rhymes. So I knew the nursery rhymes, but we didn't know how to talk to anybody or anything. I mean, it was crazy, but they didn't know what we were learning either, So anyway, we were there for 3 months, and during that time, my parents packed everything up. And I want to tell you that, you see, in Germany, you had to be so careful what you said, because they were after the Jews. And the thing is, at that time already, and I don't know whether they went up in 1935 or 36, but it was called the Stürmer. Outside, in lots of intersections in Germany, certainly in Ludwigshafen and all over, they put up a red board, and on that red board were announcements about Jews. Anything bad about the Jews that they could write up was on those poster boards. So a Jew was smart never to go look there, and somehow they could tell who a Jew was. Well, I always said it was my nose. I don't know, but anyway, I never went by those Stürmer things, and we were afraid to go near them because you didn't know who was going to be there. But anyway, my parents sent us to Stuttgart to be with my grandma so that they could pack up and do everything. And they did all that. And then they came in they came in May to Stuttgart, and that's when we left to go to Paris, France, because the boat left from Le Havre, France. And we went to Paris, and my uncle, my dad's youngest brother was there, my Uncle Ernest. So we got to see Paris, and in Paris, I saw the first black person I'd ever seen in my life, because there were no black people in Germany, and there was no way for me to see anybody. And so after we did that, after we were there for about 3 days, we went to Le Havre to get the boat. And we got the boat, and I'll tell you, the biggest thing on the boat for me was the fact that it was 1937, the coronation of King George V, Queen Elizabeth's father. And the first movie my sister and I ever saw was on the boat of Queen Elizabeth's kids, little Margaret. And Queen Elizabeth now, and her sister Margaret. That was the first movie we'd seen. I was 10, she was 8, but you didn't do movies before then. So the thing is, that was a real treat. And we had one cabin for the 4 of us. And so anyway, it was just a 5-day trip, and it was the Berengaria, a Cunard line that we came over on. And
good memory.
It was very nice. I had no complaints, and you got 3 meals and everything. And so then we got to America. And when we met those cousins finally, we did not come in by Ellis Island. We came in at the regular port in New York, and we had no trouble getting in or anything. And so our Uncle Sig and Aunt Evelyn were there, and they took us to an apartment they had gotten for us. And the thing is, it was a lovely apartment, a block off Central Park on 72nd Street, I think, somewhere right in there. It was very nice. It was on the 3rd floor, a 3-story place, and it was a 1-bedroom. So here we were, having lived rather, not fancy, but nicely in Germany. My parents slept on a pull-out couch, and Lee and I slept in the bedroom. And the kitchen at that time was all on one wall, and you could close it off with a curtain. Yeah, and that was quite an experience. And then we, after a few days, I think it's 5 days in New York or so, you had to go to school if you were going to live there. So Aunt Evelyn helped us to get to school, and my mom used to walk us every day to school and pick us up, because we didn't speak any language, and the roads and the traffic. It was close by the overhead thing in New York. It was not, whatever it's called. And so, they didn't want us, my mom certainly didn't want us walking back and forth alone, and we didn't. And so we were there, this was May. In June or July, we were sent to Girl Scout camp, and we didn't talk English. And we spent the whole 8 weeks at Girl Scout camp. And at Girl Scout camp, which was the best thing that ever happened to 2 people, Everybody else spoke English, of course. Nobody spoke German, except we spoke together all the time because we're the only ones who could understand one another. But within that time of 8 weeks, my sister learned so much English, she never had an accent or anything. You just sort of, I don't know how. While we were at camp in Kew Gardens, New York, we lived in a 6-story building and we were on the 4th floor, I think. Anyway, it was a big apartment building. And that's when we went back to school. And we went to PS 99 there because that's, I guess the schools in New York, they do with numbers and everything. So that's when we went to school. And I don't know what grade Lee started at, but I know I started in 2nd grade, and eventually I got to go to 3rd grade. So anyway, we lived in Kew Gardens, and before you knew it, my grandma came. That's my mother's mom, who was alive in Germany still. But my dad's mom, who was also alive, never came over. And I don't even know, and it's one of the things I should ask my dad, how did Oma Selma, her name is Selma Heilbronner, how did she die? And I really don't know whether she had cancer or what, you know, what it could have been. So my grandma came, and
that was Oma Clara.
That was Oma Clara, yeah. And so her, well anyway, I'll stick with Oma Clara. So she came, and in order to get a citizenship, my mom eventually took her to Cuba so she could come in through Cuba and become a citizen. Because, you know, there were a lot of Germans trying to come in and everything, and she must have come on a visitor's visa and not the other kind of visa. So anyway, my mom was gone sometime in there for a few days to come in through Cuba, so that my grandma could come in through Cuba. And eventually my grandma, who never learned to speak English, got to be an American citizen, because they weren't quite as tough as they are now, apparently. But anyway, so we lived in Kew Gardens for 2 years, and in 1939 we came to Chicago because my dad had gotten a regular job. I don't really know what all he did in New York for a living, but he did get a job. But in Chicago, we had that apartment on Everett Avenue that we had the whole time we were there, 5464 Everett Avenue, right by the lake. And I don't know how we got it or anything. You know, my parents did it on their own. And that was a lovely kind of apartment. And we had a bedroom for my mom. For my grandma, I must say. I meant to say for my grandma. So I slept in a small bedroom in the back. My grandma had her own room, and I forgot about where Lee was, but I know I slept alone in the back. The back in that apartment would have been the maid's room, you know. So, and then my parents, of course, had their own bedroom, and Freddie has the furniture, which I love to see. So the thing is, then we started in school in Chicago, and that just turned out to be a very, very nice experience all the way around. And my dad worked for a company called T-Pack, which was a transparent packaging company, and they made plastic when plastic was not as common as it is now, and basically sold it as sausage casings. So he would travel about sometimes, because my dad knew French and Spanish fluently, and so he would travel about because he was a salesman for that plastic company. And Chicago was wonderful, and we lived close to the lake, and we, you know, in the summertime we would always walk there, go swimming there. It was great. It was just perfect. But anyway, but I forgot to say, sometime it was after while we were still in New York, it was in Kew Gardens in 1938, is when Hitler took away all the Jewish men and put them in a concentration camp. That was in 1938 when he took everybody. And so my dad got all these telegrams because there were no computers. They had to do telegram. Got all these telegrams from he had one brother in Paris who, I don't know whether he was anxious to come, but his other brother was in Stuttgart. And my mother, who was one of 6 originally, her oldest brother was in Stuttgart running the company that they had, which the family had. My grandpa Julius had an underwear factory.
Julius
making
Schmidt.
underwear, Julius Schmidt company, yeah. And then her brother Robert was a doctor. He had no children. He was there. Her brother Herman had no children. He had moved to Liechtenstein earlier. Liechtenstein near Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was my mom and Uncle Eric, who was not married at the time. And then there was her sister Gretel, who later on married doctors. And that's Stevie and Ronnie Schmal's mom and dad.
Okay.
So they were all in Germany. All the men had been taken away that day, and they all wanted help in coming over. How my parents did it, I will never know. I will never know. But they all got to come out, for which, it is so amazing. So the point I'm trying to say is, we were not in the Holocaust. We came, what is really, apparently the Holocaust now considers anybody who came over at that time. But we were not the Holocaust, because I have several friends who were in the Holocaust, who were slave workers and gosh knows what else. And they are so traumatized still, they still can't talk about it and all. I mean, it is really, really rough. And we were saved all that, we were so lucky. And so the thing is that after my dad did all that, then eventually the others came over. Now my grandma was here. The next people I remember coming in, I'm not sure it's in the right order, was my Aunt Gretel, her youngest sister, and her husband Simon Schmal, who was a doctor in Germany, and he had to go to school again here to get his doctorate approved, or whatever you want to call it. And they happened to we lived at 11840 or 11940 Metropolitan Avenue in Kew Gardens. They got to move in an apartment across the street from us, which was so nice. And it was nice for my grandma too, because she was with us. And Uncle Herman went to Seattle, Washington. They did not come to Chicago. They did not come to Chicago. Uncle Eric stayed in New York, and they changed their name to Smith because he didn't. I don't know why he thought Schmidt was too German, but he changed it to Eric Smith, and he did get a job. He was sort of. He worked in the lab. He was some kind of a scientist. I can't tell you just what. So Uncle Walter, he had 3 kids. Those are our first cousins. Ruth, Hannah, and Ellen Schmidt. Those were my first cousins. And every time we came to visit from where I grew up in Ludwigshafen to Stuttgart to see my Oma Clara and visit there, we had a lovely time with my cousins. Well, 2 of my cousins came over on the children's transport. That means their parents had to let them go earlier to England, to people who they didn't even know about, to take their kids in. And I mean, that's why we were so damn lucky. We did that. Our parents didn't. I can't imagine putting my kids on a boat and not knowing when you're going to see them again. So the thing is, they did that, and eventually Uncle Walter could go to England, and then they came over. They came over with the oldest one, Hannah, but the other 2, I'm not sure if Ellen and Ruth had come earlier or not. But anyway, they went to California because I think their sponsor was in California. I don't remember. But anyway, so 2 of my cousins, my cousin Hannah and my cousin Ellen, they passed away. And I only have my cousin Ruth left, and she's not very good correspondent or anything. So I'm not too much in touch with her. I just call her on certain occasions, but she doesn't bother to call or anything. So then, the family got out, and that was very, very fortunate that everybody got out. And after that, Lee and then I don't know, after that it was just lovely American life, because my dad had the same job the whole time. And then my mom and dad started their own business at home. And it was really my mom's, well, it was my mom and dad's business. What they did is they took those plastic from T-Pack, from my dad's company, and they would sew
Just keep it here. Good.
about this long to put in insurance policies in that. That's what they did, and they sold that to companies. Yeah. So anyway, my mom was on the sewing machine a heck of a lot, because she would be doing thousands of these things, just one tube at a time, putting an edge on it. And
Mom, I have a demo.
huh?
I have a demo.
Yeah.
This is the T-Pack.
That's kind of thing, exactly.
That's
yeah.
it. That's what that's the real thing. Mom. You did
Yeah.
that to me.
Hold it up
Yeah.
against the camera.
So anyway, that helped me go to college.
I just don't know how close it'll be.
But anyway, so I went to school, I did okay. I got to go from second to third grade without completely finishing second, because, I knew.
You're smart.
I
You're
knew,
smart enough,
and
yeah.
by that time I knew my English, and we went along perfectly well from grade to grade. And my grandma lived with us all the time in Chicago. She lived with us 9 months of the year, and then for 3 months during the summer, she went to Ithaca, New York, when it was nice. And one summer, I got to take her there by train, and which was very nice, because I was old enough, to be responsible and come home by myself. Train, of course, no flying. And okay, so then everything went well, and I graduated high school, and I went to college, and at college is where I met Dickie. And the thing is, with Dickie, the cute thing is, the first semester I got to college, and I was used to people that did a lot of studying. If you had an assignment, you did it. My roommate was Ruth Meyer, his sister, who didn't like to crack a book for anything under the sun. And so I was her roommate for a semester, after which time I wasn't too impressed with her or anything. And when her parents came, they brought a big sausage, and they brought a bunch of stuff and everything. And it wasn't the best meeting under the sun. And anyway, after one semester, she dropped out. And then I had the same roommate for the rest of the time, who happened to be a girl whom I knew. Well, she'd come from Germany also. Doris Leva was her name, Doris Leva. And I roomed with her the other semesters. What there are 8 semesters for, 7 semesters I roomed with Doris. And she's a lousy correspondent, so I'm not in touch with her either, because I like to stay in touch with people. So anyway.
But Mom, you got to tell the story about seeing Richard's picture.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, so on Connie's desk, because this was the war, on Connie's desk was this picture of this cute guy, and it was a serviceman, and at the time they told you to write to servicemen to keep them in good cheer and everything. So I asked Connie, I said, how about, could I write to your brother? Tell him this and that and everything. And Connie said, oh, don't bother, he wouldn't write back. That was the end of that. I didn't ask again. And I mean, Connie, I just couldn't believe that here your parents were spending money to send you to school, room and board, But I want to tell you, my parents gave me $500 a semester. And $500 a semester, I still brought home money. That's how it was. I mean, I cannot think of thousands of dollars like, you have to do for the kids and everything. It's just so beyond me, because I so took $1,000, which was a lot of money because of course everything was different then. So, but I always managed to bring some because I didn't eat out or anything. Meals were provided. That's what we ate. We didn't go out or anything. And I got to make other friends in the building besides, you know, or with the classes and that besides Connie. And so the thing is, when I was in my last year of school, then that next summer, the next summer after my first year at Illinois, my parents sent me down to Mexico because my dad had been, I don't know if my dad was a partner or a part owner or whatever. In Ludwigshafen, my dad worked in a hardware store, but they worked internationally, I should say. They worked internationally, which one my dad was good because he could travel to different places and speak Spanish and French fluently. And at one point my dad tried to study Russian, and he said it was the most difficult thing ever, except my daughter-in-law Harriet does real well in Chinese, and I think that would be even harder. But anyway, they sent me to Mexico, and in Mexico I was supposed to improve my Spanish because I was taking Spanish, and you know, you always know Spanish around here is a good language to know, and of course it wasn't as necessary as it is now. But I went down there and I went to summer school and I did get my credits. But anyway, I hung around with a German bunch because my uncle Julius, excluding Gimble, that I lived with, that was my dad's cousin and the one he worked with. So they had boys who were a little bit older than I am, 2 boys. And all we hung around with were German kids, which is what you tend to do. And in Hyde Park High, when we were at Hyde Park High in Chicago, I tended to hang around with the German kids too, because the other kids, you know, they were snobbish. I mean, in other words, I'll just give you an example. The American kids changed their clothes every day. In Germany, you wore something for a week, you know. So here, all these Ritzy kids, Jewish kids, because it was very much a separate kind of thing, even in high school, and they came with all these clothes. And I mean, you could get jealous, except it didn't do you any good. But, you know, we learned to change our clothes more often with what we had, but we didn't have what they had. But anyway, so basically in high school, I hung around with the German Jewish crowd, as we called it. And but then going back to my trip to Mexico, that's where I sort of had my first boyfriend, somebody who was very nice and, you know, just sort of that first experience. And so that was very pleasant. And I kept in touch with a couple of the kids down there, but not anymore. And I lost complete track of my Uncle Julius and his wife's 2 boys. I do not know whether they're alive or dead, because they didn't stay in touch either. So anyway, comes my 3rd year of college, and I'm going back to Dickey now, and I had a date one night with a guy, and we were going to a concert, and with us was Richard, and they introduced me to, you know, this fella whose name I forgot, introduced me to Richard. And for some reason, I went to the concert at whatever it was the next day, because I love doing those kind of things. And Richard was there, and we sat together. And that's where we got to know one another. And then we just sort of kept going around with one another. And when Richard announced to his mother, one of my problems was in Germany, when you met somebody, stand up a minute, Franny, please.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I can do
Okay,
that.
all right.
You went like that. You made it mix. You sort of went
Oh,
like that. It's a curtsy. It's what they call a curtsy. And it was just automatic that when I met his parents, you know, whom I didn't know from a hole, I mean, I did know from having seen him with Connie and everything, but it wasn't like really knowing them. And so, I must have made a curtsy. And when Richard announced to his parents that he's gonna get engaged to me or something like that, she said, "Can't you find a nice Judaism?" But anyway, that it worked out very well. And though she was not easy to take, his mother, nor his sister, his mother got to be very, very, very fond of the kids, because she'd come for 3 or 4 weeks at a time to see the grandkids. You know, she just loved it and being here. And she could help in the kitchen. She was a great cook. I mean, talking of good cooks, Gert was, and fixing platters and everything. She was absolutely terrific. Now, Dickie's dad had
Where were they from? I mean, they were.
well, Dickie's dad, they actually born in America,
Okay.
but their families came from around Poland, Russia, in that area.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they were both Americans, American born. And the thing is that at one point, his dad had owned a hat store, or I'm not quite sure. But it wasn't hats. Anyway, then for some reason, he had to go to work for somebody else. And then Grandma Gert had a hat store. And so the big thing was, and I so enjoyed going to see her at the store on 63rd Street in Chicago, way north, north on it was 63rd, trying out different hats, which was really an experience. And in those days, people wore hats. So the thing is, we learned to get along very nicely. Never had any trouble with his dad. His dad was just a softie, just a sweet guy. So anyway, his sister regrettably took too many pills and died of that kind of thing. And so she passed away, which in many ways was a blessing, because it was not an easy life for her, or it would have been for us. A lot of responsibility. And but you know, you have to do what you do, Jill, my dear, says. And so the thing is, Dickie worked for Food and Drug for all the years in Chicago. And then then at one of the meetings, he met this Dr. Horowitz. And when they needed someone here, that's when Dickie applied to come here, and when we moved here, which was in 1961. So all along, from 39 to 61, it was Chicago. And then now, you know, then in 61, we came here, and we've been here all that time. So that's the story.
Oh, that's
And I
pretty
tell
good.
you, I didn't know I could talk that much without recording.
What was your major at U of I? What was your major? What did you graduate, a degree in
I graduated business.
business?
Yeah, and that's what I did. I worked for Society for Visual Education and Encyclopedia Britannica. Those were the big ones. And Society for Visual Education made slides in those days. And I was always in the office, you know, selling kind of thing. And Encyclopedia Britannica, we sold books and all of that. And I was doing, and then I worked for the government for 20 years. And
what was your position there?
at the government, well, I only went to work after the kids,
I was in 7th grade.
yeah, after the kids didn't come home for lunch anymore, because I loved having them come home for lunch. And one day a week, I would take off on Wednesdays, and they'd have to eat in school, and I could go downtown and see the sights, which was so terrific. I mean, that was so great, because there was always something new to see. You know, there's so many museums, didn't cost anything. You read on the way down, you read on the way home. We could walk from the subway to Wilmot Street real easily. So it was just great. So that was my day off, and otherwise the kids came home for lunch, which I loved. And then when I started to work after Franny couldn't come home for lunch anymore, when she had to have lunch in middle school.
Right.
And that's when I went to that's when I went to NIST, they call it now, National Institute. They used to call it National Bureau of Standards. Now it's National Institute of Standard and Technology. They changed it a little bit after I left, or they changed it considerably. And I worked in sales there too. We were selling something called standard reference materials. And what we were selling is instruments or powders or liquids, anything at all that would calibrate equipment, which is really important so that you're getting proper readings on things. I mean, we make standards for the Atomic Energy Agency and sold them stuff, you know, and you have certain rules and regulations for selling them things. So there are thousands of standards, which I think is a terrific thing. And I never was in charge of the group or anything. At one point, I had a few people that I could say things to, but I was just a regular worker and I didn't get up real high or anything. But I put in 20 years there so that I'm able to get a little retirement because I never made that much money in the first place, you know.
Right.
And your retirement is based on what you earn. So that's the way it was. And I would not have quit yet. I would have continued to work. But Dickie, because I enjoyed my job, I didn't mind that at all. And it wasn't too much of a drive or anything. And I didn't do a full 40-hour week. I always had less because when the kids were smaller, I wanted to be home after they got, you know, when they got home, because they weren't supposed to watch TV. But what was on when I came home was the TV. And, you know, which
I thought we turned it off sooner. I thought we'd see you coming down the way and we turn it off.
TV's
So
to be warm,
anyway.
those tubes.
What college did Richard attend?
University of Illinois.
So were you there at the same time?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, they were there at the same time. Daddy came in on the
but
GI
Daddy,
Bill.
Dickie got a master's the year later. And when after I got my bachelor's, he was working on a master's already. I put Robbie to good sleep. Good.
I'm listening.
Lesser people can do that, I'm sorry, but lesser people can do
Did you
that.
ever return to Germany? Did you ever return?
Oh yeah, we've been to Germany a couple of times.
She went with Oma. She went back with the German exchange thing.
No, I didn't. No, that was never offered to me. No. My sister and I did not really get any money from Germany like some of the older people have. Because my mom was getting money and my friend Lenny and Rolf Weil are still getting money because if it affected your education, that was one reason you could get it. If you had to quit college or high school, because schooling in Germany, the education works differently. They're still getting money every month, which is not taxable, which is terrific, you know. But we never got any of that.
Did the Schmitz ever get money for the factory?
Huh?
Did the Schmitz ever get money when the factory was taken away?
I don't know what happened with the factory. I don't know, but I know that it's on the computer because they say you can look it up.